nice. I'm just gonna try the fry first.
You like it?
I feel like I've made this at home before though. It's fresh and it's nice and hot. It's chicken tender.
Do you ever wonder why so many Europeans come home from a trip to America and suddenly can't stand their own train station? Not because the train station changed, because they did. If you want more videos like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Because this series is only getting bigger with everything happening around World Cup 2026. Today we're talking about reverse culture shock, that strange, disorienting feeling of landing back in Europe after weeks in the United States and realizing home suddenly feels smaller, colder, and quieter than you remembered. It's not homesickness in reverse. It's something else entirely. And thousands of European travelers have been describing it online in almost identical language over the past year. Start with the people. Ask any European who has spent real time in the US what hit them hardest on the way back, and an overwhelming number will tell you it wasn't the food or the highways, it was the disappearance of casual warmth. In America, strangers talk to you, not in a scripted customer service way, but constantly, unpredictably, and often with genuine curiosity. A traveler waiting at a gas station gets asked where they're from and ends up in a 15-minute conversation about football, family, and directions to the best barbecue in town.
Biscuit is so salty in a nice way. Actually, a really good biscuit. Biscuit with the honey, 8.5 out of 10.
Very kindly inviting us for a day out on their boats. We met them all at Hula Hut for a Tex-Mex, and the jalapeno ranch there might well be one of humanity's greatest.
If I say chicken salad to you, what do you think of?
Caesar salad.
A cashier remembers a face from the day before and greets them like an old friend. Groups of American fans, especially around major sporting events, have built a reputation for pulling visiting supporters into their tailgates, handing them food, and treating a total stranger like part of the crew for an afternoon. European visitors have described walking away from these encounters slightly stunned, turning to travel companions to ask if that kind of thing happens all the time here, and being told, yes, pretty much. Compare that to the return flight. Back in a European city center, the same traveler steps onto public transit and every single passenger is staring at a phone or the floor, headphones in, eyes down, an unspoken agreement that nobody makes eye contact. It's not that Europeans are unfriendly. Most will tell you their own social circles are warm and loyal. It's that public space in much of Europe runs on a different social contract, one built around privacy and reserve rather than spontaneous connection. After a few weeks of Americans striking up conversation in elevators, at bus stops, in line for coffee, that European silence starts to feel less like normal manners and more like a wall. One Scottish traveler's story that circulated widely online involved a police officer at a stadium entrance who spent several minutes joking around with a group of visiting fans, posing for photos and wishing them a good match before they'd even shown their tickets. Back home, the traveler admitted, that kind of interaction with law enforcement would be almost unthinkable, and its absence became one of the first things she said she missed. There's a second layer to this hospitality shock, and it's about the small, almost accidental kindnesses that Americans treat as unremarkable. A stranger picking up part of a restaurant tab for a family celebrating something at the next table. A shopkeeper throwing in an extra item for free because a customer mentioned it was their first time in the country. A family at a World Cup fan zone inviting a group of exhausted, jet-lagged tourists to join their tailgate setup rather than just nodding politely and moving on. None of these moments make headlines, but travelers keep bringing them up, again and again, in the comment sections of reaction videos and travel vlogs, because they add up to a feeling that in America, the default assumption toward a stranger is openness first, caution second. In much of the Europe, especially in the larger, older cities, that order is flipped. Would you rather live somewhere colder, but more private, or somewhere warmer, but far less guarded? That's the exact question a lot of these travelers say they found themselves wrestling with on the flight home. Then there's scale, and this is where the reverse culture shock gets almost comedic. Step into an American supermarket after a summer of small European grocers, and the aisles alone can feel disorienting, stretching out longer than entire European corner shops, with refrigerated sections the size of a small European apartment. Gas stations, particularly the mega travel center chains that have become minor tourist attractions in their own right, aren't just fuel stops. They're sprawling retail complexes with dozens of pumps, walls of snacks, and bathrooms clean enough to eat off the floor. Trucks on American highways dwarf anything you'll see hauling goods on a European motorway. Home appliances, refrigerators, ovens, even coffee makers tend to run noticeably larger than their European counterparts, built for houses that are themselves bigger, spread out, with driveways and garages that would be unthinkable real estate in Paris, London, or Berlin. So picture the reverse. A traveler comes home, opens their European refrigerator, and it looks like a dorm room mini-fridge by comparison. They pull into a gas station the size of a garden shed with one bathroom and no snacks beyond a rack of gum. They order what feels like a normal restaurant meal, and it arrives on a plate roughly a third the size of what they'd gotten used to in the States. None of these things changed. Europe didn't shrink. But after weeks of American scale as the new normal, the old normal suddenly looks tiny, almost quaint, and more than a few travelers have described this specific moment, standing in their childhood kitchen, feeling genuinely underwhelmed by their own home country's version of everyday abundance. Nature adds another layer entirely. Europeans arrive in America usually underestimating just how much room the country has to work with. A single national park like Yellowstone stretches across an area larger than some entire European countries, and you can drive for hours inside it and still not see all of it. The distances alone reorder your sense of geography. In much of Europe, you can cross 2 or 3 national borders in the time it takes to drive across a single American state, and multiple U.S. states span their own time zones. Travelers who've done American road trips describe a specific kind of humbling moment somewhere in Montana or Wyoming or West Texas. When they check the map, realize they've been driving for 6 hours and they're still not even halfway across the state. Wildlife adds to it. Elk wandering through mountain towns, alligators in Florida drainage ditches, bears occasionally strolling through national park parking lots, all treated by locals with a kind of practiced, low-key acceptance that visiting Europeans often find both alarming and thrilling in equal measure. Coming home from that kind of landscape to a Europe where a long drive might mean 90 minutes and crossing into an entirely different country, language, and currency creates its own strange whiplash. It's not that European nature is any less beautiful. Ask travelers and most will still defend the charm of the Alps or the Scottish Highlands fiercely. It's that the sheer physical scale of the American landscape resets your internal calibration for what big and far mean, and it takes weeks to recalibrate back down. Safety is where the reverse shock gets genuinely uncomfortable for a lot of travelers, because it collides directly with what they were told to expect before they ever left home. European news coverage of America tends to emphasize crime statistics, and plenty of travelers arrive braced for danger. What they often report instead is orderly crowds at massive events, visible and approachable police presence, and clean, well-lit streets in the tourist and stadium districts where they actually spend their time.
I appreciate it so much. Like, it is crazy. The amount of messages I receive about saying, let's go for some food, I'll take you to the best taco restaurant, let's go for a beer, I can show you around, I can be your tour guide, like, I can take you surfing. Like, guys, I wanna do it all. But listen, we can only try, eh? So if I get back to you, you're the lucky one.
A German fan's account that made the rounds online described walking through a packed stadium concourse after a night match expecting chaos and instead finding organized lines, friendly stewards, and officers who seemed more interested in taking photos with fans than anything else. That doesn't erase the very real and well-documented challenges around gun violence that exist in parts of the country, and any honest video on this topic has to say so plainly. But it does mean the live tourist experience, especially around major events with heavy security, often looks nothing like the mental image travelers brought with them. Then they land back in a European city, technically statistically safer on paper by most broad measures, and immediately notice things that never bothered them before. The graffiti on the train platform, a group loitering near a cash machine at night, a pickpocketing warning sign in 6 languages at a major tourist square. None of this means Europe is actually more dangerous than the US. Broad safety comparisons are complicated and vary enormously city by city and country by country. But perception isn't built on statistics. It's built on lived experience. And after weeks of feeling safe in a country they were warned about, plenty of travelers say their guard drops in the US and, strangely, goes back up the moment they're home. Would you rather trust the statistics or trust your own 2 feet on the ground? It's a real tension, and it's one of the most debated points in every comment section under these travel videos. Money is the theme that tends to generate the most heated discussion because it cuts both ways, and travelers are quick to point that out themselves. Wages for many skilled jobs in the US run higher than European equivalents, and tipped service workers in particular can walk away from a single good shift with more cash in hand than a similar shift would pay in most of Europe. A bartender working World Cup crowds in an American host city has described the tournament period as effectively a second income for the year. Tips stacking up from international crowd excited to be there and culturally primed to tip generously. That's the number travelers bring home and repeat to friends. What gets left out of the highlight reel and what a fair video has to include is the other side of the ledger. Healthcare costs that can be genuinely frightening without solid insurance. The absence of the kind of guaranteed paid leave most Europeans consider a basic right, and a cost of living in major coastal cities that can swallow those higher wages whole. Housing near major American job centers has become notoriously expensive, and plenty of American workers themselves will tell a curious European tourist exactly that, unprompted, mid-conversation, because Americans tend to talk about money with a directness that stuns most Europeans, who were raised to consider salary and rent numbers essentially private. So the reverse shock here isn't simple. It's not everything's cheaper or everything's more expensive. It's a traveler coming home newly aware of trade-offs they never used to think about. Guaranteed health care and 5 or 6 weeks of paid vacation on one hand, higher take-home pay, and a more entrepreneurial, faster-moving economy on the other. Several travelers have described this as the theme that stuck with them longest, not because either system is obviously better, but because experiencing both back-to-back forces you to actually think about which trade-offs you'd choose for your own life, rather than just accepting the one you were born into. Now, patriotism. This is maybe the sharpest cultural contrast of all, and the one that seems to generate the strongest reaction, positive and negative both, in online discussion. American flags fly outside private homes, gas stations, and pickup trucks is a matter of routine, not a special occasion. The national anthem before a match is treated with a hand-over-heart seriousness that catches a lot of European visitors off guard, especially those from countries where overt displays of national pride carry more complicated historical baggage and get a far more muted, self-conscious public treatment. Small towns across the U.S. host parades and local pride events with a sincerity that some travelers initially read as performative, only to walk away, after actually talking to locals, genuinely moved by how much identity and community pride is wrapped up in it. A Dutch traveler's account that circulated widely described standing in a small Midwestern town during a pre-tournament fan event, watching a Little League team walk in a local parade to genuine applause from the whole town, and admitting it stirred something he wasn't expecting to feel about a country that wasn't his own. Back home, that same overt, unironic display of local and national pride is rare, and in some contexts actively avoided, folded instead into quieter, more coded forms of identity. Neither approach is wrong, but travelers keep describing the same specific moment, standing in a European town square weeks later, flagless, quiet, orderly, and feeling an unexpected pang for the loud, unapologetic pride they just left behind, whether or not they'd admit that out loud back home. Food culture deserves its own space here too, because it's where the small daily contrasts pile up fastest. Portion sizes get talked about endlessly, and for good reason. A regular-sized drink or plate in much of the U.S. can be genuinely double what a European city would consider standard. Drive-through culture runs deeper and faster than most European visitors expect. Entire meals ordered, paid for, and eaten without a single face-to-face interaction beyond a window. Regional food identity runs stronger too. Barbecue traditions that differ meaningfully state to state. Tex-Mex versus Cajun versus Pacific Northwest seafood. Each region defending its specific version like a point of civic pride. And then there's tipping, a system that baffles most first-time European visitors. 20% added on top of an already large bill feels excessive right up until they understand it's how service workers actually make a living wage in that industry. At which point most travelers say they adjusted fast and tipped generously without complaint by the end of the trip. Coming home to smaller portions, cash-only bakeries, and a total absence of drive-through convenience isn't a tragedy. Most travelers will laugh about missing a giant milkshake far more than they'll seriously complain about it. But it's one more small, constant reminder, dozens of times a day, that the two places run on genuinely different logic, right down to how you order a coffee. Add it all up, and you get a very specific, very consistent story that keeps showing up across travel vlogs, reaction videos, and social media threads from Europeans who spent real time in the US around events like World Cup 2026. They arrive skeptical, sometimes openly dismissive, carrying a mental image built from news headlines and secondhand stereotypes about a loud, dangerous, overweight country that couldn't possibly deserve the outsized place it holds in the world's imagination. And then, again and again, that image runs directly into lived experience. Warm strangers, clean stadiums, endless open landscape, a bartender who remembers your name on day 2, a police officer posing for a photo instead of demanding papers. Plenty of these travelers end up posting some version of a public apology online, admitting they were wrong, admitting the stereotypes didn't hold up, admitting the trip changed how they think about a country they thought they already understood. That reversal, expectation crashing into reality, is the actual engine behind every one of these viral reaction videos, and it's exactly why this genre keeps growing heading into the tournament. So here's the question to actually sit with. Would you rather live somewhere colder, quieter, and more private, with a shorter drive to more countries and cultures than you can count, or somewhere louder, warmer, and vastly bigger, with higher pay and higher risk in the same breath. There's no clean right answer, and that's exactly the point. If this kind of cultural contrast fascinates you as much as it fascinates us, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who'd argue with you about it, and subscribe with notifications on so you catch the next one in this series before the tournament heats up even further. One last thing before we go. This video is a compilation and analysis built from publicly available travel vlogs, social media posts, and real-life traveler accounts shared for entertainment and discussion. And it's meant to spark conversation, not to serve as a definitive verdict on either continent. It doesn't capture the full social reality, economic picture, or official policy of any country, and individual experiences shared online will always vary enormously from person to person and city to city. We're not responsible for any decisions, travel or otherwise, that anyone makes based on it. Take it for what it is, one honest attempt to make sense of a feeling thousands of travelers keep describing in almost the exact same words.